The color drained from Benjamin's face. Reddit Maxwell Holdings, his first shell company named after his college roommate, a sloppy attempt at hiding his fraudulent activities. His silence spoke volumes. This is ridiculous. Jasmine interjected, her voice rising. Benjamin has grown this company tenfold. You're just jealous because what? I interrupted, cutting her off before her words could poison the air. Because I chose my own path while your husband was stealing from employee pension funds? The room fell silent. I could feel the weight of every eye on us, the board members no longer playing along with the farce. Cora tried to speak, but I was already opening the second folder, my hand trembling only slightly. The truth had a way of sharpening my resolve. 3 years of systematic theft, I continued, my voice ringing clear. Shell companies, fake consultancy fees, inflated contracts. I paused, letting the last word hang in the air like a death sentence. Benjamin, that's what makes this criminal, I said, my voice firm, cutting through the tension like a knife. Benjamin, you don't understand. His voice trembled, his facade finally cracking. The market was volatile, I needed to cover some temporary shortfalls. Temporary? Echoed, pulling out the bank statements with a cold, deliberate motion. Is that why you bought the yacht last month, to cover shortfalls? Jasmine's perfect composure shattered like glass. What yacht? She asked, her voice faltering. It turns out Benjamin hadn't told her about his little indulgences. The vacation house in the Bahamas, offshore accounts, the gambling debts that had begun to drown him. The next 2 hours felt like a blur, a whirlwind of accusations, denials, and shocking revelations. Benjamin tried every trick in the book. Deflection, emotional manipulation, even attempting to pin some of the blame on Elizabeth, but I had every document, every transfer, every fake contract, every lie. I did what I had to do. He finally snapped, his voice rising with that all-too-familiar bitterness. Dad would have understood, he said, his eyes wild with frustration. He knew business isn't about playing nice. That's when Cora finally found her voice, her words soft but deadly. Your father, she said quietly, fired his own brother for taking a single unauthorized commission. He would be ashamed. Benjamin laughed, but it wasn't the triumphant, victorious laugh I was used to hearing. It was bitter, cruel, the same laugh from the restaurant. Ashamed, he sneered. He'd be ashamed of you, he pointed at me, the disappointment who abandoned the family business to play humanitarian. He let out a mock sigh. At least I stayed. At least I tried to keep his legacy alive by stealing from it. I opened the third folder, the one with the police reports. As I slid it onto the table, the room went dead silent. Benjamin's face turned an interesting shade of gray, his eyes darting between me and the folder, the weight of the truth beginning to hit him. You wouldn't, he whispered, trying to summon the last of his confidence. Remember what you said about homeless people having more worth than me? I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor like the sound of a guillotine's blade descending. At least they're honest about who they are, I said, my voice cold and final. The board voted to remove Benjamin immediately as majority shareholder, something he never bothered to verify. I had already prepared the necessary paperwork. Jasmine left halfway through the voting, her perfect mask completely shattered. Cora stayed until the end, silent tears running down her face, the reality of it all sinking. When it was over, she touched my arm, her voice trembling. Benjamin, I didn't let her finish. Just make sure Hazelman is okay, I said quietly, my heart heavier than I ever thought it could be. As I was leaving, Benjamin tried one last time, his voice desperate. You can't do this to me. I'm your brother. I turned back, my gaze icy. No, I said, my voice calm yet laced with finality. What you are is a thief who happened to be born to the same parents as me. And now you're unemployed, I said, my voice cutting through the air like a razor. I hear the restaurant down the street is hiring. Try not to mock their charitable customers. The words hung in the air, heavy and cold. The police are reviewing the evidence now, and the board is meeting tomorrow to discuss restructuring. But the most important message came from Hazelman's art teacher. She had the best time in class today and won first prize for her painting. The subject? A man sharing his sandwich. Karma. Sometimes it works in mysterious ways and sometimes it works exactly as it should. I'll update you once more. After everything's settled, I said, turning to leave. Right now, I need to meet with the pension fund trustees. Unlike some people, I believe in paying my debts. Reddit final update. It's been a month since my last update and I promised to share how everything concluded. Revenge, as they say, is a dish best served cold. Mine came with a side of absolute devastation. Let's start with Benjamin. Remember how he always bragged about his business acumen? Well, the authorities didn't find it quite so impressive. They raided his house last week and it turns out the evidence I had was just the tip of the iceberg. They found records of money laundering going back 5 years. The best part? Benjamin had kept meticulous notes of everything, probably thinking he was too smart to get caught. Jasmine filed for divorce 2 days after the board meeting. Not out of any moral outrage, mind you, but because I made sure she learned about Benjamin's girlfriend in the Bahamas. The one he bought a house for using company money, the same house Jasmine thought was an investment property. Her lawyer contacted me for evidence to use in the divorce proceedings. I provided everything, free of charge. The look on Benjamin's face when he realized his wife's lawyer knew every detail of his financial crimes? Priceless. But I wasn't done. Remember that elderly man from the restaurant? He wasn't just any former employee, he was my father's original partner, the man who helped start the company. Benjamin had forced him into early retirement years ago, using fabricated performance reviews to push him out. I've reinstated his pension with back pay and given him a seat on the board. His first act? Voting to approve a complete audit of every decision Benjamin made in the last decade. The pension fund scandal hit the local news. Benjamin's face was plastered on the front page as he was escorted out of his house. His friends in high society, those who had once fawned over him, vanished like ghosts. The walls he'd built around himself crumbled. They vanished. Amazing how quickly people distance themselves when the facade crumbles. Cora tried to play peacemaker, begging me to drop the charges. He's still your brother, she pleaded, her voice trembling with the weight of a mother's love and denial. I showed her the surveillance footage of Benjamin mocking elderly employees, laughing as he cut their retirement benefits. Her eyes widened as the truth sank in and her voice faltered. She stopped defending him after that. The company? I've taken control, but not in the way Benjamin always dreamed. I restructured it into an employee-owned corporation. Every long-term employee now has equity. The look on their faces when they learned they'd be shareholders, not just workers, was priceless. That's what real business leadership looks like. Jasmine's social circle has crumbled as well. Turns out, people don't want to associate with someone who knew about pension theft and stayed silent. Her country club membership was revoked last week. Apparently they have standards. Who knew? Benjamin tried to contact me through his lawyer, offering to make things right if I dropped the charges. I forwarded the message to the prosecutors as evidence of attempted witness tampering. He's facing 15 years now, not 5. But the real karma came yesterday. Benjamin had hidden money in crypto accounts, thinking he was clever. What he didn't know was that I'd been tracking those accounts since day one. When he tried to access them from his parents' house, where he's been staying since the divorce, he found them empty. Every cent had been transferred to a trust fund for Hazelmin. Speaking of Hazelmin, she's living with Jasmine's sister now. I've arranged for her to attend the best art school in the city. The trust fund will cover her education through college. Benjamin can't touch a penny of it. His daughter will have opportunities he can't control or steal. The elderly man who sparked all this? He's thriving. I set up a foundation in his name to help retired employees. The first recipient? Benjamin's former secretary, the one he fired for asking too many questions about the accounting. Yesterday, I received a letter from Benjamin's prison. He wrote that he finally understands what true worth means. I had it framed and hung in the boardroom, right next to the new company mission statement. Integrity is not negotiable. Some of you asked if I feel bad about destroying my brother's life. I don't. He had years to choose integrity over greed, kindness over cruelty. He chose wrong every time. I visited that restaurant again last night, sat at the same table, but this time I wasn't there with family. I was there with the elderly man, now a board member, and we discussed plans for the company's new charitable foundation. As we left, I saw someone who looked like Benjamin's former golf buddy, now bussing tables. Karma does take its time, but when it arrives, it brings receipts. This will be my final update. The company is thriving. Hazelmin is flourishing in her new school. And Benjamin? Well, orange is apparently his new signature color. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone fall. It's making sure they have a clear view of everything they lost as they hit bottom. It's been a while since everything unfolded, and as I sit here reflecting on it all, I realize there are so many lessons I've learned, not just about my brother but about myself, my family, and the importance of staying true to who you are. It's funny how things work out, and sometimes we don't realize the significance of our actions until much later. But looking back, here's what I've learned from everything that happened. I've always believed that integrity is something you don't compromise on, no matter the cost. Looking at Benjamin, I see someone who chose to betray that belief. He thought that by hiding behind deceit and lies he could have it. Oh, wealth, power, everything he wanted. He took shortcuts, manipulated people, and thought he could get away with it. But in the end it all crumbled. His empire was built on lies, and that's never sustainable. My choice was different. I could have turned a blind eye or even joined in his schemes, but I didn't. I stood by what I believed in, even when it felt like I was fighting a losing battle. The lesson I've learned is simple. Integrity is not negotiable. Sure, it might seem harder in the moment, but when you stay true to yourself, the results are always worth it. Greed and dishonesty have consequences. Looking at Benjamin, I can't help but think how his own actions were his downfall. The greed, the theft, the manipulation, he thought it was all going unnoticed. But greed has a way of consuming you. It doesn't stop at one thing. It spirals. And when it does, you lose everything you once had. I've seen it firsthand. Benjamin lost his family, his reputation, and eventually his freedom. The most crushing part of it all was knowing that he had the opportunity to make things right, but he chose greed over honesty. Sometimes, it's easy to think that no one will find out, that we can get away with things. But trust me, that's never true. Eventually, everything catches up with you. Family shouldn't compromise who you are. Cora always tried to protect Benjamin no matter what he did. She loved him, and in her eyes he was her golden child, the one who could do no wrong. But sometimes love can cloud judgment. I've learned that you can love your family and still make tough decisions. At the end of the day, I had to protect myself and protect Hazelman from a person who was willing to sacrifice everything for his own gain. Family is important, but it shouldn't come at the cost of your integrity, your peace, or your future. Benjamin taught me that. In the end, my loyalty had to lie with the truth, not with blind family loyalty. Kindness and empathy matter more than you think. I've always believed in kindness, in helping others when they need it. So when I saw Mr. Harrison sitting outside that restaurant all alone with nothing to his name, I knew I had to do something. It wasn't just about giving him food. It was about showing him that someone cared. And you know what? That small act of kindness, that simple gesture, set everything in motion. It was the tipping point that exposed Benjamin's corruption and opened my eyes to the truth about him. Sometimes we think that kindness doesn't change anything, but it does. It has the power to shift the course of events, to change lives, and to reveal the truth. Karma works in its own time. Benjamin thought he was untouchable. For years he got away with everything, lying, stealing, manipulating. But the thing about karma is that it doesn't forget. It has a way of finding its way back to you, even if it takes years. And when it arrives, it doesn't just change things. It changes everything. Benjamin learned that. I watched him fall from the heights he'd built, and I watched him finally understand what true worth really means. It wasn't the money or the power or the yachts. It was about integrity, honesty, and how you treat others. Karma takes its time, but when it comes, it's unforgiving. If you're reading this and feel like you've learned something, like maybe this story resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe. There are many more stories, lessons, and experiences to share. Let's continue this journey together. Subscribe now and be part of something meaningful. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Even homeless people have more worth than you. My brother laughed as he ate the food I bought. Everyone laughed with him as though it were a joke that could echo forever. I didn't argue, didn't fight back, I just stood up and walked away. A month later he regretted it. I never imagined that my brother's true colors would reveal themselves over such a simple act of kindness. But here we are. This happened last Friday, and I'm still processing everything that went down. For some context, I've always been the black sheep of the family, the one who strayed from the path. While everyone else joined the family business, I decided to carve my own way. My brother, Benjamin, took over from our father and never lets anyone forget it. The thing is, I've done quite well for myself, well enough that I'm usually the one picking up the tab when we go out as a family. That Friday was meant to be a celebration. Benjamin had been bragging about a big deal he'd closed, so I offered to treat everyone to dinner at a nice upscale place downtown. My mother, Cora, was there along with Benjamin, his wife, Jasmine, and their daughter, Hazelman. Hazelman, at 8 years old, is probably the only genuine person in our family besides me. The evening started like any other. Benjamin dominated the conversation, talking about his usual business triumphs, while Jasmine nodded along as if Benjamin were sharing the secrets of the universe. I've learned to tune it out over the years, instead focusing on Hazelman's stories about school and her latest art project. It wasn't until our food arrived that things took a turn. Through the restaurant's window, I noticed an elderly man sitting on a bench outside. He had a small cart with what looked like everything he owned, trying to stay warm in the evening chill. I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where I can help others, so I quietly asked our server to add another meal to our order, the soup of the day and a sandwich, and have it packed to go. No one noticed. The exchange playing savior again, little brother. Benjamin smirked, his voice dripping with condescension. I ignored him, letting the sting of his words pass like a distant storm. Instead, I turned to Hazelman, her eyes lighting up as she told me about her latest science project. It was one of those rare moments when I could escape the harsh reality of my family, clinging to the purity of her innocence. But Benjamin couldn't let it slide. "You know," he said loudly enough for everyone in the restaurant to hear, "it's funny how you're always trying to prove you're better than everyone else with these charitable acts. Is it because you're trying to forget when we were kids and Dad had to bail out your failed ventures?" His words hung in the air, sharp and bitter, like a knife twisting in the silence. I kept my focus on Hazelman, but I could see that she had gone quiet. Her little face pressed against the window, her innocent eyes filled with the kind of perceptive look kids get when they sense that something isn't right. Even the air around us felt heavier. Jasmine was already giggling, anticipating whatever cruel joke Benjamin was about to drop next. The server returned with the packed meal and I excused myself, needing air, needing to escape. As I stepped outside to offer the food to Mr. Harrison, Benjamin's voice carried through the open window. "Even homeless people have more worth than you." He laughed, the words bouncing off the walls, mocking me. "At least they're honest about who they are. You're just pretending you're not the same failure you've always been." The sound of his laughter, so cold and full of contempt, washed over me like a wave. But Mr. Harrison had just thanked me, his voice soft with gratitude, a warmth that contrasted sharply with the venom I'd just heard. The sound of laughter erupted from our table again. Cora's nervous chuckle, Jasmine's shrill cackle, and Benjamin's booming laugh. It was a chorus of cruelty, a sharp cacophony that seemed to drill into my skull. I looked over at Hazelman. She sat there, her face pale, eyes wide with concern, her little hands frozen over her plate. It was as if, in that moment, she understood the weight of the world on my shoulders, something no child should ever have to carry. I walked back inside, my steps slow, deliberate. I sat down, trying to tune out the noise, but the weight of their laughter pressed down on me. Benjamin didn't miss a beat. His jabs about my charity cases and how I was buying a personality kept coming, one after the other, each word a calculated hit. And with each punch, I felt Hazelman sink further into herself, her earlier enthusiasm now deflated like a punctured balloon. When the check came, I didn't speak. I pulled out my card without a word. Benjamin was in the middle of yet another story about his supposed business acumen, but I wasn't listening. I stood up, cutting him off mid-sentence, and said, "Thanks for dinner." Jasmine chirped, not even bothering to look up from her phone. I glanced at each of them. Cora, avoiding eye contact like she was trying to shrink into the seat. Benjamin and Jasmine, lost in their own bubble of self-importance. And Hazelman, who suddenly jumped up to give me a tight hug. I held her close, feeling the warmth of her innocence for a fleeting moment. I set my card on the table, the bills paid, and stood up without another word. "I need to go," I said, my voice steady, but the weight of the moment hanging between us. As I walked toward the door, I could see through the window Benjamin rolling his eyes, probably gearing up for another snide comment about my dramatic exits. What they don't know is that I spent the weekend making calls, digging into things I had ignored for far too long. I had supported the family business more than they realized, and now it was time to take a closer look at what Benjamin had been doing with all that responsibility he was so proud of. Mr. Harrison was still there when I left, his sandwich carefully wrapped in a napkin, saved for later. He thanked me, his voice calm and full of dignity, something Benjamin could never understand. I handed him my business card, telling him to stop by my office if he ever needed anything. The contrast between the man's quiet gratitude and Benjamin's arrogance was too stark to ignore. Benjamin thinks worth is measured by how much you can take from others. He's about to learn how wrong he is. Reddit Update 1. First, thank you all for the supportive comments on my last post. A lot has happened and I need to share what I've discovered. It's worse than I initially thought. These past 2 weeks have been a whirlwind. My phone has been lighting up with messages from family members, each more desperate than the last. I haven't responded to any of them, except for Hazelman's text about her art projects. She shouldn't have to suffer for the adult's drama. The really interesting part started last Tuesday when I received an email from Elizabeth, my father's old friend who handles some of the paperwork for the family business. The subject line was simple: "We need to talk." What followed was a 2-hour video call that left me feeling cold. Turns out, my brother Benjamin's big deals weren't exactly what he'd been claiming. Elizabeth had noticed discrepancies in the accounts, small at first but growing increasingly obvious, like tiny cracks in a dam, threatening to break wide open. She tried bringing it up to Cora, but Cora just brushed it off with her usual, "Benjamin knows what he's doing," attitude. The words, so casual and dismissive, stung, but I kept my focus. The truth had begun to unravel, and I spent the next few days quietly sifting through the records Elizabeth sent over, each document like a breadcrumb leading me deeper into a maze of deception. The pattern was undeniable. Benjamin had been systematically siphoning money from Reddit Family Corporation for years. Not small amounts either. We're talking millions, funneled through consulting fees to shell companies that all seem to lead back to personal accounts. The irony hit hard. Some of those accounts, those hidden wells of greed, were funded by my own investments in the family business. Every time Benjamin needed a capital injection for his supposed expansion plans, guess who he came to? That's right, me. And I always helped, believing I was supporting our father's legacy. Yesterday Jasmine called, not to apologize mind you, but to ask if I'd be attending the board meeting next week. Her voice dripped with that fake sweetness, the kind she uses when she wants something. I let it go to voicemail, but the message was revealing. Benjamin says it's just a formality, but he really needs you there to sign some papers. Family has to stick together, right? Right, family? What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already spoken to the board members. It turns out Benjamin had been feeding them different versions of the company's status for months, each version carefully crafted to hide his mismanagement. But numbers don't lie. These numbers told a story of systematic theft and fraud, a web spun so tightly that I could feel the weight of it, each new discovery pulling me deeper into its grasp. The most disturbing discovery came when I checked the timestamps on certain transactions. Remember that elderly man outside the restaurant, the one I bought dinner for? The same day I did, Benjamin had transferred a substantial sum to an offshore account, a sum that matched exactly what was needed to cover payroll for our father's longest-serving employees. He's been toying with people's livelihoods, playing with their futures like a game, while mocking those who show even the smallest shred of humanity. Cora sent a text this morning, her words filled with desperation. Please, Benjamin, whatever you're doing, think about your brother's family. Think about Hazelmin. I am thinking about Hazelmin, and how her father has been stealing her future, teaching her that cruelty is acceptable as long as you're laughing while doing it. The truth is, Benjamin has been molding a world of privilege, one built on lies and mockery. His perfect little kingdom is about to crumble, and he doesn't even know it.my phone buzzed again. It was a text from Benjamin. Hey little brother, we need you at the office tomorrow. Time to step up and be part of the family business. Finally, what do you say? What do I say to that? Nothing yet. But I've prepared 3 folders of documents. One for the board, one for the authorities, and one for our mother, who will finally have to confront the truth about what her golden child has become. Some of you asked in the comments of my last post why I didn't stand up to Benjamin at the restaurant. The truth is, I've been standing up to him my entire life, just not in a way he could see. Tomorrow he'll understand exactly what kind of person he's been mocking all these years. Remember that elderly man from the restaurant? He came to my office last week. Turns out he used to work for my father. The stories he shared about Benjamin's early days in the company filled in the last few pieces of the puzzle. I've arranged for a car to pick up Hazelman from school tomorrow and take her to her favorite art class. She shouldn't have to witness what's about to unfold. Sometimes protecting family means protecting them from other family members. The meeting is set for 9 a.m. I'll update you all tomorrow on how it goes, but one thing's certain. Benjamin is about to learn that karma doesn't always take the high road. Reddit update 2. The board meeting just ended. I'm sitting in my car trying to process everything that happened in the last 4 hours. Some of you asked for an immediate update, so here it is. I arrived early at 8:30 a.m. The conference room is empty as a tomb except for Elizabeth, who was setting up the projector. She gave me a slight nod, signaling that everything was ready. I placed my 3 folders on the table, the weight of the evidence heavy in my hands, and I waited. At 8:55 Benjamin strutted in, the same arrogant swagger that had made him unbearable since childhood. Jasmine trailed behind him like a shadow, her eyes never leaving his, as though he were the sun itself. And when he saw me, that same smug grin spread across his face, the same one from the restaurant. Finally decided to join the family business, little brother? He said, his voice dripping with disdain. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as the board members filed in, followed by Cora. Her eyes flicked nervously between Benjamin and me, a slight twitch of guilt hidden beneath her attempt at calm. She knew something was wrong but didn't know what yet. Benjamin started the meeting with his usual flourish, boasting about growth projections and future expansions like a man who had already won the world. I let him go on for exactly 15 minutes, letting him dig that hole deeper and deeper. Then I opened the first folder. Before we discuss expansion plans, I said, my voice calm, betraying none of the chaos churning inside, we should review these transactions from the past 3 years. I slid copies to each board member, watching their expressions as the truth began to sink in. Benjamin's face didn't change, but his left eye twitched, an old tell, one he'd had since childhood. Jasmine immediately reached for her phone, likely preparing to spin the story to control the narrative. But I had already ensured the room's signal was blocked. No escape, no lies. What's this about? one board member asked, flipping through the pages, his confusion clear. It's about accountability, I replied, my voice steady. I turned to Benjamin, fixing him with a stare that could cut through steel. Would you like to explain the consulting fees to Reddit Maxwell Holdings, or should I?